The sun streamed through the tall windows of Maplewood Elementary, casting warm rays across the classroom and illuminating the vibrant artwork that decorated the walls. It was a bright Monday morning, and the sounds of laughter and chatter filled the air as children settled into their seats, eager to start the week. Ms. Harper, a devoted teacher in her 30s, with a kind smile and gentle demeanor, stood at the front of the room, organizing her lesson plans for the day. She loved her job, finding joy in the curiosity and enthusiasm of her young students. As she glanced around the room, her eyes fell on Charlotte, a timid 8-year-old girl with big brown eyes that seemed to hold a world of secrets. Today, however, Charlotte was unusually quiet. While her classmates giggled and shared stories, she sat at her desk, staring blankly at her notebook, her fingers nervously tapping on the cover. Ms. Harper's heart went out to her. She could sense that something was amiss. "Okay, class," Ms. Harper clapped her hands to get their attention. "Let's start our morning with a fun story. Who's ready to dive into the world of imagination?" The children cheered, but Charlotte remained silent, her gaze fixed on the desk. During story time, Ms. Harper noticed that Charlotte didn't join in the laughter or enthusiasm that filled the room. When she called on Charlotte to share her thoughts about the story, the girl hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was nice," she said, her eyes darting away. "Nice is great, Charlotte, but what did you like most about it?" Ms. Harper encouraged, hoping to coax her out of her shell. Charlotte fidgeted, her fingers now gripping the edges of her desk. "I don't know," she replied, her voice cracking slightly. Ms. Harper sensed the weight of something heavy behind Charlotte's eyes. She made a mental note to check in with her later, knowing that sometimes kids needed a little extra support. As the day progressed, Ms. Harper tried to engage Charlotte in various activities, but the girl remained distant. The other students played during recess, laughing and running freely, but Charlotte stood alone by the fence, watching from a distance. Ms. Harper's heart sank. She knew that something was bothering her student, and she was determined to find out what it was. When the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Ms. Harper began packing her things, her mind still on Charlotte. She looked up just in time to see Tom, Charlotte's uncle, walk into the classroom. He was a tall man with a scruffy beard and an air of impatience about him. As he approached, Charlotte's expression shifted drastically. Panic flickered in her eyes, and she instinctively clutched Ms. Harper's arm, her small fingers wrapping tightly around it. "Please, I don't want to go with him," Charlotte cried, her voice trembling with fear. The outburst echoed in the otherwise quiet classroom, drawing the attention of the remaining students and teachers. Ms. Harper froze, taken aback by the intensity of Charlotte's plea. She knelt down to meet Charlotte's gaze, her heart racing. "Charlotte, is everything okay? You can tell me," she said softly, trying to maintain a calm and reassuring tone. Charlotte looked torn, her big brown eyes darting between Ms. Harper and Tom, who stood at the door with a dismissive grin. I just don't want to go," Charlotte stammered, her voice barely a whisper now. "He's not nice to me." Tom chuckled, a sound that sent a shiver down Ms. Harper's spine. "Come on, Charlotte. You know I have to take you home. Your mom is waiting," he said, his tone casual, but with an underlying edge that made Ms. Harper's instincts flare. "Charlotte, you can talk to me," Ms. Harper urged, her gaze unwavering. "Is there something you want to tell me? You're safe here." The weight of responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders. She knew that children often struggled to voice their fears, and she wanted to create a space where Charlotte felt secure enough to share. Charlotte hesitated, glancing back at Tom, who was now tapping his foot impatiently. "Please," she whispered again, her voice choking with emotion. Ms. Harper's heart ached for the girl. "Charlotte, you can trust me," she pressed gently. "I won't let anything happen to you. Just tell me what's wrong." Tom stepped forward, his expression hardening. "She's just being silly. Come on, Charlotte, we have to go." His dismissive tone was laced with irritation, and Ms. Harper felt a surge of protectiveness for the child in front of her. "No!" Charlotte shouted, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't want to go with you!" She clung to Ms. Harper, her small frame trembling. "Charlotte, listen to me," Ms. Harper said, keeping her voice steady and soothing. "You're not in trouble for feeling this way. Let's talk about it. You can stay here until we figure this out." She cast a wary glance at Tom, who now wore a scowl. and her mind raced with the implications of Charlotte's words. "Enough of this nonsense," Tom snapped, stepping closer. "You're coming with me, and that's final." His voice was low and threatening, causing Ms. Harper to instinctively place herself between him and Charlotte. "Charlotte, you're safe here," she repeated, her heart pounding. "We'll sort this out together." The tension in the room was palpable, and she could feel the weight of Tom's anger radiating off of him. Tom huffed, crossing his arms. "This is ridiculous. You're just making things worse for her." Ms. Harper stood firm, her resolve hardening. "I'm not letting her go with you until I know she's safe. If there's something going on, I need to protect her." Her voice was steady, but inside, she felt her heart racing. Tom's eyes narrowed, and Ms. Harper could see the rage bubbling beneath the surface. She knew she had to tread carefully. "Charlotte, can you tell me why you don't want to go?" she prompted again, hoping to draw the girl's courage out. Charlotte's lip quivered, and she looked at Ms. Harper with desperation. I don't want him to hurt me," she finally managed to say, her voice breaking. Ms. Harper's heart sank. The implications of those words hung heavily in the air. She felt a surge of determination to protect her student, but the uncertainty of what to do next loomed over her like a dark cloud. Tom's dismissive expression deepened into one of anger, and Ms. Harper knew that she had to act quickly. "Charlotte, let's go to the counselor's office," Ms. Harper suggested, her mind racing through the possibilities of how to handle this situation. "I want to make sure you're okay." As she led Charlotte away, she could feel Tom's glare burning into her back. The moment felt charged with unspoken threats, and she knew that this was just the beginning of a battle that was far from over. After school, the air in Maplewood Elementary buzzed with the chatter of children and the sounds of sneakers squeaking against the polished floors. Ms. Harper, still troubled by Charlotte's plea, made her way to the principal's office, her heart pounding with urgency. She knocked gently. On the door, her mind racing with thoughts of the little girl who had captured her concern so deeply. "Come in," called Principal Thompson, his voice warm yet authoritative. Ms. Harper opened the door to find him seated behind a large mahogany desk, papers strewn about like fallen leaves. He looked up, his brow furrowing as he sensed her distress. "Ms. Harper, is everything all right?" he asked, motioning for her to sit down. "I'm worried about Charlotte," she said, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "Today, she seemed terrified of going home with her Uncle Tom. She begged me not to let her go with him." Principal Thompson leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from concern to contemplation. "Charlotte's situation has come up before. There have been whispers about Tom's behavior. He has a history of erratic actions, but we haven't had enough evidence to take any serious steps." "Erratic behavior?" Ms. Harper echoed, her heart sinking. "What kind of behavior are we talking about?" "The kind that raises alarms but does not provide a clear-cut case for intervention," he explained, rubbing his temples. "There have been reports of him yelling at Charlotte, but nothing that could be substantiated in a way that would compel us to act." Frustration bubbled within her. "But I can't just ignore this. Charlotte needs protection. If Tom is hurting her—" "I understand your concerns, Ms. Harper," Principal Thompson interrupted gently. "But you must also consider the implications of making accusations without solid evidence. It could escalate the situation." She felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "What if something happens to her while we wait for evidence? I can't just stand by. I have to do something." After a moment of silence, Principal Thompson sighed. "I suggest you speak to social services. They may be able to investigate further, but I can't promise they'll act quickly." "Thank you, I will do that," Ms. Harper replied, determination filling her voice. She stood up, ready to take action. As she left the office, she felt a mix of hope and helplessness swirl within her. How could she protect Charlotte? Later that afternoon, Ms. Harper sat at her small desk, the fading light casting a warm glow across her papers. She looked at the phone in her hand, contemplating her next move. Finally, with a deep breath, she dialed the number for social services, her heart racing with every ring. "Social services, how may I assist you?" a cheerful voice answered. "Hi, my name is Ms. Harper. I'm a teacher at Maplewood Elementary. I need to report some concerns about one of my students. Charlotte," she began, her voice steady despite the tension in her chest. She explained the situation, detailing Charlotte's distress and her uncle's questionable behavior. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Ms. Harper," the voice replied, sounding professional and attentive. "We will look into it. However, please understand that investigations can take time." "I understand," Ms. Harper said, her shoulders slumping slightly, "but I'm worried about her safety." "Your concerns are valid. We will do our best to assess the situation promptly," the representative reassured her before ending the call. As she hung up, Ms. Harper felt a wave of mixed emotions wash over her. She was relieved to have taken a step toward helping Charlotte, but the feeling of helplessness lingered like a shadow. What if it wasn't enough? She glanced at the clock, noting that it was nearly time to head home, but her thoughts were consumed by Charlotte. The next morning, Ms. Harper arrived at school with a sense of dread weighing heavily on her heart. She made her way to her classroom, where the colorful decorations seemed to mock her worries. When the students began to trickle in, her gaze immediately searched for Charlotte. When the little girl finally arrived, Ms. Harper's heart sank. Charlotte's usual bright smile was absent, and her big brown eyes were cast downwards, avoiding contact. The once lively girl now seemed like a shadow, lost and withdrawn. "Good morning, class," Ms. Harper said, trying to infuse some energy into her tone. "Today, we're going to have some fun with art." As the children gathered their supplies, Ms. Harper approached Charlotte, kneeling beside her. "Hey, Charlotte," she said softly, her voice gentle. "Would you like to join us at the art table? We're going to draw whatever we feel." Charlotte hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "I don't feel like drawing," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's okay," Ms. Harper replied, trying to coax her gently. "But sometimes drawing can help us express what we're feeling inside. Would you like to give it a try?" Charlotte looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't want to draw," she said firmly, but Ms. Harper could see the battle within her. "All right, but if you change your mind, I'll be right here," Ms. Harper said with a warm smile, hoping to reassure her. As the class began their art activity, Ms. Harper kept an eye on Charlotte, who sat at her desk, staring blankly at the paper in front of her. The other children laughed and chattered, their voices a stark contrast to the silence enveloping Charlotte. After a few minutes, Ms. Harper noticed that Charlotte had finally picked up a crayon. She pressed it against the paper, her small hand moving hesitantly. As the minutes passed, the strokes became more deliberate, yet the expression on Charlotte's face remained somber. When the class began to wrap up, Ms. Harper approached Charlotte's desk. "Can I take a look at what you created?" she asked gently. Charlotte looked up, her brow furrowed, but then slowly turned the paper toward Ms. Harper. The drawing was haunting. A dark figure loomed over a small child, the shadows swirling ominously around them. The child in the picture appeared small and frightened, a stark representation of vulnerability. "Oh, Charlotte," Ms. Harper breathed, her heart aching at the sight. "This is powerful. It looks like you have a lot on your mind." Charlotte nodded, her lip quivering. "It's just, sometimes I feel like he's always there watching me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Who, sweetie?" Ms. Harper asked, kneeling closer, her heart breaking for the child. "Uncle Tom," Charlotte replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Ms. Harper placed a comforting hand on Charlotte's shoulder. "You're safe here, Charlotte. You can tell me anything. I promise to help you." Charlotte looked at her, and for a moment, the wall she had built seemed to waver. But then the fear crept back into her eyes. "I can't. I don't want to get him in trouble." "Sometimes it's important to speak up, even if it's scary," Ms. Harper encouraged softly. "You deserve to feel safe." With that, Ms. Harper knew that she had to tread carefully. She had taken the first step in uncovering the truth, but it would take time and trust for Charlotte to feel secure enough to open up completely. The battle was far from over, and she was determined to fight for that brave little girl who needed her protection more than ever. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow over Maplewood Elementary as the recess bell rang. Children poured out of classrooms like a river bursting its banks, laughter and shouts echoing through this playground. But in the midst of the joyful chaos, Ms. Harper felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. She knew she had to speak with Charlotte, to delve deeper into the girl's fears about her uncle. Spotting Charlotte sitting alone on a swing, her small frame hunched slightly, Ms. Harper approached with a gentle smile. "Hey there, Charlotte," she said softly, taking a seat on the swing next to her. "Mind if we chat for a moment?" Charlotte looked up, her expressive brown eyes clouded with uncertainty. She hesitated, glancing around as if searching for an escape. I guess so," she mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's just us here," Ms. Harper reassured her, leaning a bit closer. "You can talk to me about anything. I promise I'm here to help." Charlotte fidgeted with the hem of her sweater, her fingers twisting the fabric nervously. "I don't want to get Uncle Tom in trouble," she said finally, her voice trembling. He gets angry sometimes." Ms. Harper felt her heart constrict. "Angry how, Charlotte? Does he hurt you?" Charlotte's eyes darted toward the ground, her cheeks flushing. "Not always," she replied hesitantly, as if weighing every word. "But sometimes he yells and it's really loud. And once he pushed me." The admission hung heavy in the air, and Ms. Harper's stomach knotted with a mix of sadness and anger. "That's not okay, Charlotte. You deserve to feel safe. And if someone is making you feel scared, we need to talk about it. I promise I won't let anything bad happen to you." Charlotte looked up, tears welling in her eyes. "But he's my uncle. What if he gets mad at me for telling?" "Sweetheart, it's not your fault," Ms. Harper said, her voice steady and reassuring. "You're being very brave by telling me this. Sometimes adults don't act the way they should, and that's why it's important to speak up. I want to make sure you're safe." Charlotte nodded slowly, her small hands clutching the swing's chains tightly. "He says he's just trying to help me. He says my mom is gone, and he has to take care of me. But I don't think he knows how." Ms. Harper felt a lump form in her throat. The weight of Charlotte's words struck her profoundly. Tom's attempts to care for Charlotte were overshadowed by his inability to control his anger, leaving the little girl to navigate a world of fear and confusion alone. "Charlotte, you're not alone. We can find someone to help both you and your uncle. But we need to talk to Mr. Jenkins, the school counselor. He's really good at listening." "Will he tell Uncle Tom?" Charlotte asked, her voice trembling with fear. "No, Charlotte. Mr. Jenkins will keep everything you say private. He wants to help you feel safe and happy again." Ms. Harper smiled gently, hoping to alleviate some of the girl's anxiety. "How about we go talk to him together?" Charlotte took a deep breath, her resolve beginning to harden. "Okay," she agreed reluctantly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "But I'm really scared." "I know, sweetie," Ms. Harper replied, standing up and offering her hand. "But you're so strong, and we'll face this together." As they walked toward the school counselor's office, Ms. Harper felt a profound sense of responsibility settle upon her shoulders. She had to protect Charlotte, to give her a voice in a situation where she felt powerless. Once inside the counselor's office, Mr. Jenkins welcomed them with a warm smile. "Good afternoon, Ms. Harper, and you must be Charlotte," he said, his voice soft and inviting. "Hi," Charlotte mumbled, her eyes downcast. "Charlotte, I understand you've come to talk about some things that are bothering you," Mr. Jenkins said gently, gesturing for them to sit down. "You can talk about whatever you want. There's no rush." Ms. Harper took a seat beside Charlotte, offering her silent support. The room was filled with colorful posters and plush toys, creating an atmosphere of safety that slowly began to envelop Charlotte. She looked around, her curiosity piqued momentarily before returning to the weight of her confession. I don't want to get Uncle Tom in trouble," Charlotte whispered again, her voice wavering. "That's okay, Charlotte," Mr. Jenkins replied calmly. "We are here to help you, not to get anyone in trouble. What's most important is how you feel. You can share anything with me." Charlotte took a deep breath, her small hands fiddling with the seams of her pants. "He yells a lot, and sometimes he pushes me. But it's because he's stressed, I think. He says I'm all he has left and I should be grateful." Ms. Harper felt her heart break anew. The child's innocence shone through even in her pain, and it was a stark reminder of the complexities hidden beneath the surface of familial relationships. "Charlotte, it's natural for you to feel confused. Adults can sometimes express their feelings in ways that aren't right. It's not your fault," she said gently. Charlotte looked at Ms. Harper, searching for reassurance. "But he loves me, I think." "Love shouldn't hurt, Charlotte," Mr. Jenkins interjected softly. "I know this is hard to understand, but love means feeling safe and respected. You deserve that, no matter what. Tears spilled down Charlotte's cheeks, and Ms. Harper reached out, gently wiping them away. You're so brave for talking about this, Charlotte. We're going to help you. You're not alone anymore. After the conversation, Charlotte seemed a bit lighter, as if the burden she had been carrying was shared, if only for a moment. Ms. Harper felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. They were taking steps forward, and the road ahead, though uncertain, was lined with support. Later that week, Ms. Harper received a call from social services. The voice on the other end was professional but cautious. Ms. Harper, we're currently investigating Tom. However, I must inform you that without concrete evidence of abuse, our hands are tied. It may take time to gather enough information to ensure Charlotte's safety. Ms. Harper felt a mix of frustration and helplessness. But what can we do in the meantime? Charlotte is in danger. We understand your concerns, and will do our best to expedite the process. However, it's essential that you keep an eye on Charlotte and document any incidents that may occur, the voice on the line instructed. Thank you for your help, Ms. Harper replied, her heart heavy. She hung up and gazed out the window, watching the children play. Her mind raced with thoughts of Tom and the uncertainty surrounding Charlotte's home life. How could she ensure the little girl was safe without solid evidence? As the days passed, Ms. Harper stayed vigilant, checking in on Charlotte during class and making sure she felt supported. But the looming presence of Tom hung like a dark cloud over their lives, reminding her that the battle was far from over. Each time Charlotte walked into the classroom, Ms. Harper felt a surge of determination. She would not let fear dictate the girl's life any longer. The resolve within her strengthened with each passing day. She would find a way to protect Charlotte, no matter the cost. As the afternoon sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the playground, tension hung thick around Maplewood Elementary. Miss Harper, having just finished tidying up her classroom, stepped outside, her mind racing with thoughts of Charlotte and the unsettling encounter she had with Tom. The air felt charged, electric, with the kind of apprehension that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Just then, a figure loomed at the edge of the schoolyard. Tom was there, his tall frame silhouetted against the setting sun, the light catching the hard lines of his jaw. Ms. Harper felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She hadn't expected him to confront her so soon. "Ms. Harper!" he called out, his voice cutting through the laughter of the children. She turned, steeling herself for what was to come. "Mr. Jenkins was just telling me how well Charlotte did in class today," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter of anxiety in her chest. "Cut the crap," Tom shot back, striding toward her with an intensity that made her heart race. "You think you can just meddle in my family's business? You don't know anything about us." Ms. Harper took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. "Tom, I'm only looking out for Charlotte. She's been through so much, and it's clear she's not safe with you." He stepped closer, invading her personal space, his anger palpable. "You don't know what you're talking about. She's my niece. I have every right to take care of her. You have no idea how hard it is for me." "Then why is she so afraid of you?" Ms. Harper replied, her voice unwavering. "You can't deny what she's feeling." Tom's expression flickered, a brief shadow of uncertainty crossing his face, but it was quickly replaced by a scowl. "You don't get to decide what's best for her. You're just a teacher. And you're just a man who has a history of erratic behavior," she countered, her heart pounding. "I've spoken to the principal and social services. They're aware of your situation." He laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound. "You think you can take my niece away from me? You think they'll believe you? I'm her family." "Family doesn't mean putting her in danger," Ms. Harper asserted, her voice rising. "You need help, Tom. I'm not afraid to fight for her safety." For a moment they stood there, locked in a tense standoff. The wind rustled through the trees, and the laughter of children faded into the background, leaving only the heavy silence between them. Finally, Tom broke the gaze, a flicker of something, fear perhaps, crossing his features before he turned abruptly on his heel and stormed away. As he walked off, Ms. Harper couldn't shake the feeling that his anger was just the tip of the iceberg. She had opened a door, and now there was no going back. She felt an overwhelming urge to protect Charlotte, to ensure that the little girl would never have to face Tom's wrath alone again. That evening, as the sun set and darkness crept into the corners of the world, Charlotte's absence weighed heavily on Ms. Harper's mind. She had spent the hours after school preparing a lesson plan and organizing art supplies, but her thoughts were a chaotic whirlpool of worry for her student. The evening wore on, and as the clock ticked closer to 8, Ms. Harper felt a sense of dread. She had just settled on the couch with a cup of tea when her phone buzzed insistently on the table. She picked it up, her heart racing as she saw the caller ID. It was Charlotte's school. "Hello," she answered, her voice tinged with apprehension. "Ms. Harper, it's Mr. Jenkins. I'm calling because there's a situation with Charlotte." "What do you mean?" Ms. Harper's heart dropped. She ran away from home." "What? Where is she?" "We're still trying to locate her, but I thought you should know." Ms. Harper felt a chill run down her spine. "I'll look for her. She might be at the park." Without a moment's hesitation, she grabbed her keys and rushed out the door, her mind racing with all the possibilities of where Charlotte could be. The park was a few blocks away, a place where children from the neighborhood often gathered to play and seek solace. As she drove, she thought of Charlotte's frightened expression, the way she had clung to Ms. Harper's arm that day in the classroom. The little girl was so small, so delicate, and Ms. Harper felt a fierce protectiveness surge within her. Arriving at the park, she scanned the area, her heart pounding in her chest. The playground was empty, shadows stretching long over the swings and slides. "Charlotte," she called, her voice echoing into the quiet. "Charlotte, where are you?" Just then, she spotted a small figure huddled behind a tree, her blonde curls catching the fading light. Ms. Harper rushed over, relief flooding her as she approached. "Charlotte!" The girl looked up, her big brown eyes brimming with tears. "Ms. Harper!" she cried, launching herself into Ms. Harper's arms. "Oh, sweetheart, I was so worried about you!" Ms. Harper hugged her tightly, feeling the tension in Charlotte's small body. "Why did you run away?" "I was scared," Charlotte sobbed, burying her face into Ms. Harper's shoulder. "I don't want to go back to Uncle Tom. He gets angry, and I don't want him to hurt me again." Ms. Harper's heart broke at the revelation. "You're safe here, Charlotte. I promise you'll never have to go back to him alone. We'll figure this out together." Charlotte pulled back slightly, her eyes searching Ms. Harper's face for reassurance. "Really? You're not going to let him take me back?" "Not if I can help it," Ms. Harper replied firmly, kneeling to meet Charlotte's gaze. "You're brave for running away. You did the right thing. But we need to find a safe place for you." They sat on a nearby bench, the cool evening air wrapping around them, as Ms. Harper spoke softly, assuring Charlotte that she was not alone. "You can stay with me tonight," she said gently. "We'll figure out what to do in the morning." Charlotte nodded, her small hands gripping Ms. Harper's tightly. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know, sweetheart, but I won't let anything happen to you. You're safe with me." As they made their way back to Ms. Harper's home, the weight of the world seemed to settle on both their shoulders. The night unfurled around them, stars twinkling faintly above, unaware of the battles being fought just below their gaze. Upon arriving home, Ms. Harper prepared a small meal for them, trying to make the evening as normal as possible. They sat at the kitchen table, Charlotte picking at her food, her eyes darting to the window every so often. "Charlotte, do you want to talk about what happened?" Ms. Harper asked gently, hoping to coax her student into sharing more. I don't understand why Uncle Tom is like that," Charlotte said, her voice trembling. "Sometimes he's nice, but then he gets angry, and I don't know what to do." Ms. Harper nodded, her heart aching for the confusion and fear that must have overwhelmed Charlotte. "Sometimes people act out because they're hurting themselves. It doesn't excuse his behavior, but it can help us understand that it's not your fault." Charlotte looked down at her plate, contemplating Ms. Harper's words. "Do you think he'll come looking for me?" "I think he might," Ms. Harper replied honestly. "But I won't let him hurt you, I promise. You're safe here." After dinner, Ms. Harper set up a cozy spot on the couch, laying out blankets and pillows to make it feel inviting. "This is where you'll sleep tonight. I'll be right in the next room if you need me." Charlotte climbed onto the couch, curling up, as Ms. Harper tucked the blanket around her. "Thank you for being here, Ms. Harper." she whispered, her eyes growing heavy with sleep. "Of course, Charlotte. You're like family to me," Ms. Harper replied, her heart swelling with a sense of purpose. As she turned off the lights and settled into her own room, Ms. Harper couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The world outside felt dark and dangerous, and she knew that Tom could still pose a threat. She glanced out the window, her heart racing as shadows danced in the corners of her vision. As she lay in bed, her thoughts spiraled, caught between the weight of Charlotte's fear and the looming presence of Tom. She had opened the door to a battle she never wanted to fight, and now it seemed that the darkness was closing in around them. But as she listened to the soft rhythm of Charlotte's breathing from the couch, Ms. Harper felt a spark of determination igniting within her. She would protect this child at all costs, no matter what it took. The unseen battle was just beginning, and she was ready to face it head-on. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the living room, Ms. Harper felt her heart race as she heard the unmistakable sound of pounding on her front door. Tom's voice, raw with desperation, pierced the evening calm. "Open up, Ms. Harper! I know Charlotte's in there!" His words were laced with fury, and Ms. Harper instinctively moved closer to Charlotte, who stood wide-eyed and trembling beside her. "Shh, it's okay," Ms. Harper whispered, her voice steady despite the chaos brewing outside. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them both. "We're safe here, I promise." She gently took Charlotte's hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "Why is he so mad?" Charlotte's voice was barely a whisper, filled with fear. "Because he's worried about you, sweetheart," Ms. Harper replied, though she knew the truth was far more complicated. "But I'm here to protect you. Just stay close to me." Taking a deep breath, Ms. Harper momentarily turned away from Charlotte and rushed to the kitchen, where she had left her phone. Her fingers shook as she dialed 911, and the operator's calm voice offered a slight sense of reassurance. "911, what's your emergency?" "I need police assistance," Ms. Harper said, her voice firm despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "There's a man at my door, and I believe he poses a threat to a child in my care. His name is Tom, and he's the uncle of my student." "Stay on the line, ma'am. Can you tell me your location?" As she provided her address, Ms. Harper cast a glance back at Charlotte, who was now huddled on the couch, her small frame curled into itself. "Charlotte, I need you to stay quiet and calm, okay? The police are on their way." "Will they take him away?" Charlotte asked, her eyes wide with innocence and fear. "I don't know, honey," Ms. Harper admitted, "but we'll make sure you're safe." And just then, the pounding on the door grew more insistent. "Ms. Harper, let me in! We need to talk!" Tom's voice was a mix of anger and desperation, causing Ms. Harper's heart to race even faster. She could sense the danger in his tone, the unpredictable edge that made her skin crawl. "Charlotte, stay here," she instructed, moving to the door and peering through the peephole. Tom was pacing back and forth, his hands clenched into fists, his face flushed with frustration. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door a crack, just enough to speak to him without inviting him in. "Tom, you need to leave," she said, her voice steady but firm. "The police are on their way. You can't see Charlotte right now." "Why not? I'm her uncle. I have the right to take her home." His voice rose, each word dripping with agitation. "Not when there's a possibility of harm. And you know that," Ms. Harper countered, her stomach churning. "You need to calm down and step away from the door." Tom's eyes flickered with something that resembled fear, but it was quickly replaced by a stubborn resolve. "You're just a teacher. You don't know what's best for her. She belongs with me." He pushed against the door, trying to force it open, but Ms. Harper braced her weight against it, determined not to let him in. "Tom, please, this isn't helping," she pleaded, her voice rising in urgency. "We can talk this out when the police get here. For now, I need you to back off." His expression twisted, and for a moment, Ms. Harper saw a glimpse of the turmoil within him. "You don't understand. I'm all she has. If you take her away from me, I'll lose everything." His voice cracked, a raw vulnerability seeping through the anger. Ms. Harper hesitated, her heart aching for Charlotte's uncle, but she could not allow that to cloud her judgment. "You may love her, but love doesn't justify hurting her. You have to understand that." Suddenly, the sound of sirens pierced the air, and relief washed over her. "The police are here," she announced, feeling a surge of strength. "You need to leave now, Tom. Please." He hesitated, glancing back towards the sound of approaching vehicles. With a frustrated growl, he took a step back, his hands lifted in surrender, though his eyes remained fiery. "This isn't over, Ms. Harper. You'll regret this." As the police officers approached, Ms. Harper quickly opened the door wider, allowing them inside. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice steadying as she turned to the officers. "This is Tom. He's here to pick up his niece, but I believe she's not safe with him." "Tom, we need you to step aside and talk to us," one of the officers said, his tone authoritative but calm. "We've received reports about potential harm to Charlotte." Tom's demeanor shifted, a flicker of panic crossing his face. "I didn't do anything wrong," he protested, backing away from the door as the officers approached him. "Let's take a walk outside, shall we?" another officer suggested, gesturing for Tom to follow. "We'll get your side of the story." From her vantage point, Ms. Harper could see Charlotte peering around the corner, her small hands trembling. "It's okay, sweetheart," she called softly, beckoning her closer. "The police are here to help." Charlotte hesitated, then took a tentative step forward, her small feet moving reluctantly. Ms. Harper knelt to her level, wrapping her arms around the girl. "You're safe now. No one is going to hurt you, I promise." As the officers led Tom outside, Charlotte watched with wide, fearful eyes. "What are they going to do to him?" she asked, her voice shaky. "They're going to talk to him and make sure you're safe," Ms. Harper reassured her. "Just remember, you're not alone anymore. I'm here for you." Minutes felt like hours as they waited, the tension thick in the air. Finally, one of the officers returned, his expression serious. "Ms. Harper, we need to discuss the situation further. Can you tell me what led to this?" Ms. Harper took a deep breath, recounting everything she had observed over the past few days. The fear in Charlotte's eyes, the troubling behaviors exhibited by Tom. As she spoke, she could see the officers exchanging glances, their expressions shifting from concern to determination. "Thank you for your cooperation," one of the officers said, nodding. "We're going to take Tom in for questioning. It's important that we gather all the facts to ensure Charlotte's safety." As they prepared to escort Tom away, Ms. Harper felt a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. She turned to Charlotte, who had curled into her side, seeking comfort. "You did great, Charlotte. You're so brave." Charlotte looked up, her eyes glistening. "Is he really gone?" "For now, yes," Ms. Harper assured her, brushing a strand of hair behind Charlotte's ear. "And we're going to make sure it stays that way." As the police car pulled away, Ms. Harper wrapped her arms tightly around Charlotte, holding her close. "You're safe now, and we're going to figure this out together. I won't let anyone hurt you again." But as the night deepened, doubt flickered in the back of Ms. Harper's mind. Had they done enough? Would Tom retaliate? The shadows of uncertainty loomed over them, but for that moment, all that mattered was the small girl in her arms, safe and sound. Days had passed since Charlotte had found refuge in Ms. Harper's home, a sanctuary where she could begin to heal. The sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow in the living room, where Charlotte was coloring quietly on the floor. Ms. Harper observed her from the kitchen, feeling a mix of relief and concern. Although the initial storm of fear had subsided, the undercurrents of anxiety lingered like the scent of coffee in the air. Just as Ms. Harper began to relax, there was a knock at the door. She frowned, her heart racing slightly as she approached. The postman stood on the doorstep, holding out a letter with a familiar handwriting, Tom's. She felt a knot tighten in her stomach as she took the envelope, the weight of it heavy with implications. "Who is it, Ms. Harper?" Charlotte's voice was small, a hint of curiosity lacing her words as she looked up from her drawing. "It's just the mailman, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about," Ms. Harper replied, trying to sound casual, even though her heart was pounding. She forced a smile, but her mind raced with thoughts of what Tom could possibly want after everything that had happened. After the postman left, Ms. Harper retreated to the kitchen table, the letter trembling slightly in her hands. She hesitated, glancing back at Charlotte, who was now engrossed in her art. With a deep breath, she opened the letter, the paper crackling softly as she unfolded it. "Dear Ms. Harper," it began, the handwriting shaky and uneven, as though Tom had written it in a hurry. The words poured out, revealing layers of pain and regret. He spoke of his troubled childhood, of being taken from his parents and thrust into a world of uncertainty. He described the scars that had shaped him, the anger that had often bubbled beneath the surface, and the mistakes he'd made while trying to be the caretaker for Charlotte. As Ms. Harper read on, her heart sank. Tom confessed that he had never wanted to hurt Charlotte, but his own demons had often taken control. "I did what I thought was best for her," he wrote, "but I know now that my best was not enough. I was scared and I lashed out. I don't want to be a monster in her eyes. I want her to know that I love her, even if I don't know how to show it." Tears pricked at Ms. Harper's eyes as she processed Tom's words. She understood the complexities of trauma, how it could warp good intentions into harmful actions. But could this be an excuse for his behavior? Was it possible to feel sympathy for someone who had caused Charlotte so much pain? Just then, Charlotte walked into the kitchen, her small figure framed by the sunlight. "Ms. Harper, what's wrong?" She tilted her head, eyes wide with concern. "You look sad." Ms. Harper hastily wiped her eyes and folded the letter, placing it on the table. "It's nothing, honey, just a letter." Charlotte's brow furrowed. "From Uncle Tom?" Ms. Harper hesitated, searching for the right words. "Yes, but it's complicated, Charlotte. Sometimes people do bad things, but it doesn't mean they don't care. It's hard to explain." Charlotte's eyes narrowed, her innocence juxtaposed against the weight of her experiences. "But Ms. Harper, is Uncle Tom really a bad person?" The question hung in the air, a delicate thread connecting them both. Ms. Harper took a moment, weighing her response carefully. "I think sometimes people can be both good and bad. They can make mistakes, but that doesn't mean they don't love us. It's important to remember that love can be complicated." Charlotte frowned, her small brow furrowed deeper. "But he hurt me, Ms. Harper. He yelled and sometimes it felt like he didn't want me." Her voice trembled, and Ms. Harper knelt down to Charlotte's level, her heart aching at the hurt that still lingered in the child's eyes. "I know, sweetheart, and I'm so sorry you had to go through that. You didn't deserve it," Ms. Harper said softly, brushing a stray hair behind Charlotte's ear. "But it's also okay to feel confused about him. It's okay to be angry. You are allowed to feel however you feel." Charlotte nodded slowly, a mix of emotions swirling in her gaze. "But what if he really loves me? What if I'm the one who's wrong?" Ms. Harper's heart clenched. "You are not wrong for feeling scared or hurt. Those feelings are real and they matter, Charlotte. Love doesn't always look the way we want it to. Sometimes it gets messy and complicated." Charlotte's lips quivered as she processed this. "So, can he get better? Can he change?" "That's a question only he can answer, Charlotte. People can change, but they have to want to. It takes a lot of work and sometimes help from others," Ms. Harper explained, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "But remember, you don't have to forgive him right away. You can take your time." Charlotte took a deep breath, her small hands clutching her drawing tightly. "I don't want to go back to him, Ms. Harper. I feel safer here." A smile broke through Ms. Harper's concern. "And you are safe here, Charlotte. I promise to do everything I can to keep you safe. You are brave, and I'm so proud of you for sharing how you feel." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their conversation settling in the air. Ms. Harper felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps they could navigate this together, one step at a time. The complexities of Tom's past were daunting, but the bond she was forming with Charlotte was stronger, built on understanding, compassion, and a fierce desire to protect. As they returned to their drawings, Ms. Harper's mind continued to whirl with thoughts of Tom's letter. She knew it was only the beginning of a long and difficult journey. The battle for understanding and healing would require patience, both for herself and for Charlotte. A sudden knock at the door jolted her from her thoughts. "I'll get it!" Charlotte chirped, racing toward the door with unexpected enthusiasm. "Wait, Charlotte, let me—" But it was too late. The door swung open to reveal Tom, standing on the doorstep, his expression a mix of desperation and remorse. "Charlotte," he called, his voice trembling. Ms. Harper stepped forward, instinctively placing herself between Tom and Charlotte. "What are you doing here, Tom?" she demanded, her voice firm. "I just want to talk to her. Please," he pleaded, his eyes darting to the little girl behind Ms. Harper. After everything that has happened, you think you can just walk in here? Ms. Harper shot back, her heart racing. You need to leave. Ms. Harper, please, Tom's voice cracked, his hands raised in surrender. I know I messed up. I'm trying to get help. I just want to explain to Charlotte. Explain what? How you hurt her? Ms. Harper's protective instincts flared as she glared at him. You have no idea what she's been through because of you. Tom's shoulders slumped and he looked genuinely regretful. I know I'm not a good person right now, but I want to be. I want to be better for her. Then you need to show that, not just say it. You need to give her space. Ms. Harper replied, her heart pounding. Please, just let me talk to her. I'll do anything, Tom implored, his voice barely above a whisper. Ms. Harper felt a surge of conflict. She wanted to protect Charlotte fiercely, but she also recognized the depth of Tom's despair. Charlotte, do you want to talk to him? She asked gently, turning to the little girl who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes. Charlotte hesitated, her gaze flickering between Tom and Ms. Harper. I don't know, she finally whispered. Take your time, Ms. Harper reassured her, feeling the weight of the moment. As they stood there, the air heavy with unresolved emotions, Ms. Harper realized that the battle was far from over. It wasn't just about protecting Charlotte or condemning Tom. It was about navigating the complexities of love, trauma, and forgiveness, a journey that would require courage from all involved. This was not just an unseen battle for Charlotte's safety. It was a confrontation with the past, a reckoning that would shape their futures. And as they stood on the precipice of this new chapter, Ms. Harper vowed to guide Charlotte through it all, ready to face whatever came next.